Hi, everybody. This is Saad for the Sad Truth. Today constitutes the inaugural answering questions from fans episode. When I first started my channel, I had then solicited some questions from folks, but then I didn't end up pursuing that particular structure for the show. And so, what I thought I would do today is revive this idea. I solicited a few days ago from folks that they sent me in their questions, and many of you responded. I actually spent uh, quite a bit of this morning going over your questions, and I actually took the time to reply to every single person, letting them know that at least I have read their questions. I'm not sure that this is something that I'll be able to manage going forward because it takes a tremendous amount of time for me to do so. But in any case, thank you so much for all your questions. Uh, there was no exact criteria that I used in deciding which questions to answer or not. But one of the things that I looked for is to try to look for novel questions, ones that I might not have addressed in either directly already or in some indirect way. So a lot of questions that dealt with Islam or things that deal with evolutionary psychology that I would have already covered, I tended to avoid just so that I don't repeat myself. So here we go. I have about, I think, 10 plus questions. I did not prepare for them. In other words, I wrote them onto a separate Word document, and then I just want to go through it on the spot. So here we go. This first one is really to dissuade you from sending me the same question over and over again. Did you watch Jordan Peterson's discussion with Sam Harris? If so, what do you think of it? And the short answer to that is that no, I have not listened to their exchange, although I've had several people write to me their opinions of the exchange. I won't share with you what they said, but it has certainly piqued my curiosity to, at some point, spend the necessary time to listen to it, although that might have to wait for a while because there are many other things on my plate. And so the short answer is no, I haven't listened to it. If and when I do, and if it's still relevant for me to comment on it, I'd be happy to do so then. Excuse me. Number two, I really like the second question: is revenge ever justifiable? So the way that I would answer that is really uh, by making an appeal to some evolutionary arguments. So if you think of our emotions as really solutions to adaptive problems, right? I mean, our emotions don't just arise out of thin air, unless you think that God somehow put them in us. And so our cognitive system, our perceptual system, our affective systems, hence our emotions, are all ultimately designed to be of that form because they solve some adaptive problem. I've previously discussed things like how men and women have evolved a different response, emotional response, when it comes to being exposed to either sexual or emotional infidelity from their partners. And the sex difference that you pick up there in this emotional response to the two types of infidelity is very much rooted in an evolutionary calculus. And so now taking this idea to other emotions, right? I mean, why do we experience envy? Why do we experience anger? Uh, and in this case, revenge. Well, of course, then the argument is that that particular emotion certainly has some evolutionary benefits that are associated with it. Think about uh, a bunch of guys who wish to, who are eyeing your women or your other, other things that they want to take from you. Uh, One of the things that they have to think about in deciding whether to pursue their desire for conquest is how likely are you to retaliate, and if that retaliation is sufficiently strong, what do they stand to lose from that retaliation? And so there is a mechanism by which the fear of retaliation, the threat of revenge, is something that keeps people in check, or at least makes them question whether they should engage in a particular action that might elicit such a response. So, from an evolutionary perspective, of course, revenge exists for a reason, and that in that sense, it's justifiable. Now, I don't know if the person who asked the question meant it, with a moral bent. I've actually argued in discussing the death penalty. I'll leave that discussion for another time, but I've argued that it is perfectly reasonable for people to have evolved the desire to seek retribution from truly grotesque criminals who, in a sense, have engaged in certain behaviors that no longer permits them to navigate amongst us. Now, some might say, well, that simply means you put them away in jail forever. I actually argue that it is justifiable that we certainly feel the emotion of wanting to execute them. I mean, if you've raped and killed 10 children, and it is absolutely incontrovertible that we don't have to think that you might be innocent, we found your DNA in the rectum of 10 different children, then I see no problem in seeking revenge and in ending your life. Now, I'm sure some people will disagree with that. And so the bottom line is I think that yes, there are contexts where revenge is justifiable, and certainly from an evolutionary perspective, we could understand why we've evolved that particular sentiment. Number three, how vocal were your parents regarding politics/current events when you were young, and how were you influenced by their opinions and overall approach to controversial topics? Uh, I sort of hesitated in terms of whether I wanted to answer that or not because I don't really like to, uh, in a sense, violate the privacy of some of the dynamics within my personal upbringing. But I'll simply say that no, I did not come from an environment where reasoned, polite, uh, informed dialogue was something that happened around the dinner table, and so I don't think I was influenced in the least bit in terms of my family dynamics. If anything, I was repulsed by a lot of the family dynamics because it was actually an environment where uh, there was sort of a hierarchical process. If someone is older than you, then by definition, they know more than you. Shut your mouth. I'm older. I'm a male. Or whatever the metric that defines the hierarchy. Now, that in part is due to Middle Eastern culture, and of course, it's also due to the individual people that raised you. And so, to answer that question, no, I did not grow up in an environment where I benefited from that particular, from having open discussions. This is something very much that is part of my own personhood, and if anything, that was certainly the source of a lot of frustration in my family dynamics. Number four, this is someone who asked about educational evolutionary psychology. Let me just read you some of their sort of introduction. I'm a high school math teacher. It's always been a great source of frustration for me that the students who come to us from primary school are generally 2 to 3 years behind in their skill development, and so we just play catch up. My theory has been that the trend away from traditional skill and drill learning in maths toward more immersion and project based learning is the cause of this. And then he goes on to uh, describe or point to an article that he read where they tried to explain how evolutionary psychology might be applied in an educational context, and then asked me to weigh in on this issue. I'll answer very broadly in the following way. Evolutionary psychology is a theoretical lens that could be applied anywhere that involves the study of biological agents, and certainly human biological agents in this case. And so, uh, in my first book and in other settings, I've listed all of the different disciplines that have been infused with evolutionary theory in general and evolutionary psychology at times in particular. And so, education is one such field. And so, you could infuse the study of education with some evolutionary principles that are actually quite valuable. Let me just give you one or two examples. So you could study things like how the evolution of play helps us learn things about the world. And so we know, for example, from other animals that they use play not only as a form of, as a source of fun to develop some of their skills. For example, if they're predators, they play games of, predator and prey. But play is a immersive way to actually learn things. And so one could study things like how does our evolutionary bent for play uh, affect our ability to learn things. So that would be one example. Another example might be, are there particular uh, designs of a school that makes a school more hospitable? So I've previously, in a previous Saad Truth clip, talked about biophilic design or evolutionary architecture, whereby you take certain principles that cater to our innate love for nature, and then you could demonstrate that certain buildings, certain playgrounds, certain hospital rooms are either more in line or less in line with our uh, biophilic instinct, and hence it results in differential outcomes. And so if you're talking about, say, designing a playground, um, some playgrounds look like they're federal, maximum security prisons, while others are, lush with greenery. They look very inviting. And so only that manipulation of the design of the space can have a profound experience in terms of how your child experiences his or her daily life at school. The types of things that we learn and how easy it is for us to learn those things. So there's something called, right, folk psychology, folk biology, folk physics. So this is sort of the instinctual understanding of the world uh, that people hold. Sometimes they're incorrect uh, forms of facts, right? Sometimes your folk psychology could be incorrect, but the idea is that there is some information that we learn that is inherently easier to learn and grasp than others. Some have talked about what's called primary knowledge versus secondary knowledge. Primary knowledge would be stuff that is very much linked directly to evolutionary problems, whereas learning calculus would be a secondary knowledge. Not that, of course, it's not important to learn calculus, not that calculus is not used to explain various phenomena in nature, but it's not something that, in this sense, is natural to us. So, understanding how people learn things and the differential ability to learn things or different domains of knowledge is itself something that could be understood via an evolutionary lens. So, I'll stop there, but there's all sorts of very, very interesting uh, evolutionary approaches that could be used in the study of education, and also in the manner in which, for example, you design pedagogic approaches. How should teachers uh, interact with students in a way that maximizes their learning, and can evolutionary theory be used to help us understand what is the optimal dynamics to be used? The next two questions sort of also relate to education, and that's why I sort of put them back to back. So here's the next. This is question 5. I'm a very privileged child, but like any sane person, I believe one should be surrounded by a diverse collection of thoughts, economically, race, religion, beliefs, region, religion, etc. My dad put me in public school when I could have uh, went, okay, some grammatical issues, to a private school so I could meet, quote, real people. I'm asking someone who lacked most privileges growing up, meaning me, God Saad, should I be worried about being surrounded by only wealthy, elite, liberal students? So that question is really, whether there's a benefit to interacting with a diversity of people. And so here I will use a personal anecdote. Many years ago, I was sitting and chatting with my dad. I hope that he would not mind that I'm sharing the story. And as we were sitting there, he sort of stopped and said, the thing that I regret so much is that I didn't, you know, insist to send you to Jewish school when you were growing up. And so I looked at him. He's thinking that that's where he, quote, failed me. I looked at him and I said, well, that's funny, Dad, because if I were to thank you for anything in particular, it would be exactly for not having sent me to Jewish school. I learned uh, very quickly to associate with a broad range of people, not only when we were growing up in Lebanon, and that I interacted, of course, with kids of different faiths, uh, but when we then came to Canada, I wasn't in an insular Jewish environment. Yes, of course, at home, we were certainly very Jewish in our identity, and we're very clear about what our heritage was. But I grew up interacting with uh, Jamaicans and Haitians and Greeks and Italians and Vietnamese and all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life. I went to public school. I did not go to private school, and I think I turned out okay. And so, yes, there's definitely a benefit to being exposed to a broad range of people. Uh, I think, if some of you who watch my chats, I mean, I think that my ability to interact with a broad range of people is certainly largely, overwhelmingly due to the fact that's just my personhood. That's just the random combination of genes that make up make up who I am, allow me to interact with a diversity of people. But I also think that the fact that I had the opportunity to grow up in a diverse environment, also, for example, from my soccer playing days, it's not as though I grew up, playing soccer with Chaim and Mordechai. I was with the Jamaicans and the Italians and all of the sort of stereotypical folks that you think would be, the very committed soccer players, and that again allowed me to have a completely richer reality. So, to the student who's writing, yes, there are benefits to going to a private school, depending. I mean, if your alternative is to go to a drug infested public school, then that may not be a good idea. But in general, certainly more diversity is not something that one should overlook. Next, number 6, uh, with virtue signaling having become a major factor of the so called liberal left, and people's mentality seem to orient around problems and complaining and whining rather than solution and respectful dialogue. Do you think Western education needs a tweak to address these issues? Excuse me. I hesitated. I didn't know if I should include this question or not because, in a sense, I have actually addressed this topic on numerous occasions when I talk about the safe spaces and the trigger warnings and the microaggressions and the political correctness. I'm exactly addressing those points. So I'll just briefly say that the short answer to your question is yes, Western education does need a tweak. It needs a tweak in terms of setting the fulcrum uh, back, away from all the political correctness nonsense. Uh, the only thing we should care about when we are educating a mind is to teach it how to think, how to evaluate evidence. Of course, to teach that mind knowledge. Uh, in other words, hurt feelings, causing offense, forbidden knowledge, offensive knowledge, a victimology ethos that determines what can or can't be discussed. All of these things have no place when you are training a mind, when you are educating a person. And so, in that sense, we certainly would benefit from redressing some of the lunacy that we've been seeing on campuses. Last question dealing with sort of parenting and education. Excuse me. Do you have any parenting advice for raising kids in a PC culture? For example, what to do if in school your kids are asked to check their privilege or are being taught crap like males are potential future rapists or white men are the source of all evil in the world today? In brackets, I am the father of elementary, middle school kids. Well, that very much relates to the previous question. Don't sit idly. Don't be silent. Fight this idiocy. And of course, depending on who you are, depending on what is your platform, then you could fight this in different ways, right? I mean, if you have my platform, you will fight it in one way. If you are a parent who otherwise doesn't have a public platform, then you might simply go to see your teacher and say, look, I'm concerned about this. You might go see your principal and say, I don't like the way curriculum contains certain elements that are contrary to what I consider to be uh, appropriate pedagogical approaches. So, in other words, just be involved. Yesterday, I appeared on a show with Ezra Levant, a freedom of speech hero from Canada. He's got a very popular show on the Rebel TV, and he asked me, what do we do in this battle? And I said that there are no magic pills. It's ideological trench warfare, right? You could have these discussions on your Facebook page, on Twitter, at parties. Just don't walk away from your convictions. Don't walk away from your conscience. Uh, the problem, of course, is that people, number one, are cowardly. Number two, are politically correct, which I guess these two things go hand in hand together. And so oftentimes they don't want to cause waves. They want to avoid conflict. But the reality is that you can't win a battle of ideas without ever jumping into the boxing arena, metaphorically speaking. You can't uh, show the other that they are wrong, whilst caressing them and telling them that everything is okay and everybody is correct, right? When you walk into an actual boxing ring, you don't make love to each other. You beat the hell out of each other. And so, metaphorically, the battle of ideas involves beating up your opponent's logic, your opponent's thinking. Of course, in as respectful and polite a manner as possible, but it is a battle of ideas. It is oftentimes an ideological war, and if you wish to participate in it, there's no way of avoiding conflict. So get involved. Number 8, 4 more questions, and then there'll be 2 others that I won't address today, but at least I'll mention them. Is there a Darwinian reason behind racism? Does it benefit us as humans to be racist from an evolutionary perspective? Excuse me. So I'll answer this again first from an evolutionary perspective. Racism, if you'd like, is a ugly manifestation of other cognitive mechanisms, right? So if you think, for example, about how we form an attitude. So one argument is that we form an attitude because it allows us to, it's a means of organizing knowledge. So for example, if I say, uh, all Japanese electronic products are great, I trust them. I really love German engineering. What have I done? I've systematically, with that attitudinal position, helped organize the environment, right? And so, if you like, racism or stereotyping becomes an ugly manifestation of this otherwise ability that we have. Look at it another way. Coalitional thinking is very much part of our cognitive architecture, right? We're built to view the world as us versus them, as red team versus blue team. Of course, religion, certainly the Abrahamic religions, are very good at piggybacking on this effect, right? There are the Jews and the Goys, the believers and the kuffar. And so it is, if you like, natural that we create these demarcations. Uh, the problem, of course, with racism is that, again, it's an ugly manifestation of an otherwise adaptive process, right? To then say, well, Jews can't be trusted. Well, you're certainly organizing knowledge, as per my original point when I started answering this question. Uh, you're certainly engaging in coalitional thinking, but it's an ugly manifestation of that. So I don't think that the issue is that racism inherently itself has an evolutionary advantage, but rather racism, if you like, is the uh, maladaptive, not maladaptive, but rather ugly manifestation of an otherwise uh, innate mechanism that exists within us. And again, by the way, this is one of those explanations whereby people wrongly will think that if you try to explain a uh, an ugly reality within the human condition, you are justifying it or condoning it, right? If you explain child abuse or pornographic addictions or marital infidelity or rape via an evolutionary lens, that means you are okay with it. Of course, only an idiot would arrive to such a conclusion. Number nine, which relates very much, I guess, to racism. I would love to hear your take on Richard Spencer, the quote Nazi who was punched by a protester. Now, I don't know the exact story here. I just sort of saw it on my social media that there was some guy, I don't know exactly who he is. Several people have asked that I speak to him. I'm guessing he's some alt-right guy, or I don't know if he's what he is exactly. But he was speaking at I don't know if it was a Trump rally or the Women's March or so on. So forgive me if I didn't do my homework on the case. But apparently, as he was speaking, somebody came up to him and punched him. And of course, some people are saying, "Well, of course, what's wrong with that? I mean, he's a execrable creature, and he's got no business having a platform. And yeah, I'm going to go after this guy." And others said, "What the hell are you talking about?" Well, I side with the "What the hell are you talking about?" Uh, as some of you know, I've gone on record on multiple occasions saying that despite the fact that I'm Jewish, I support the right of people to deny the Holocaust. I mean, it's difficult to imagine a more vile position than to uh, reject, a historical fact that not only is profoundly grotesque, but that is obviously of personal importance, obviously being a Jewish person. And yet I state that if you believe in freedom of speech, then these are the boundary conditions where you establish whether you are a true supporter of freedom of speech. And so if I support the right of the Holocaust denier to spew his stupidity, then by that very same logic, it is not okay for me to go up to him and clock him with a 2x4. The way that I smash him is with my ideas. I clobber him with my words, with my evidence. Now, that doesn't mean, incidentally, that I'm a pacifist. Very, very, very far from it, as some of you might surmise just from my general disposition. I'm very nice when I need to be, and not so nice when I need to be. But, of course, as a reasonable person living in a civilized society, I don't believe that we resolve our differences through violence, even when the person with whom we disagree holds profoundly inappropriate or disgusting positions. Number 10, I was wondering if you would be so kind as to share the systems you have put in place to improve your health, and if you have utilized evolutionary psychology to approach this at a meta level. This is smelling like Joe Rogan level fat shaming. Uh, as some of you know, until maybe my mid 20s, I was a very, very, very thin, highly competitive soccer player. And then, of course, through the years, as happens often with former athletes, I put on weight. So I'm guessing that the person in question is referring to this because, knock on wood, as I knock on my forehead, my health, as far as I know, is very good. But of course, I could stand to lose weight. But the question that he's asking, in a sense, is does the fact that I understand evolutionary psychology well, that I understand what makes people tick, does that somehow help me make better decisions? And the answer is yes and no. I mean, yes, in that, uh, look, if you are a woman who is on a diet, uh, knowing that the likelihood of you sticking to your diet will wax and wane as a function of where you are in your menstrual cycle is valuable information to have. Now, here's the rub. The fact that you have this information doesn't mean that you won't succumb to whatever Darwinian pull that's pulling you in a particular direction, right? I mean, if all it took were knowledge, then we wouldn't have people having unprotected sex and we wouldn't have obese people because, of course, we know that the people who are sitting and leading sedentary lives and eating french fries, it's not because, oh, gee, they didn't know any better. And now that they know, they're going to suddenly become, athletic specimen. And that's, in a sense, what surprised me about Joe Rogan's position when I appeared on the show last. And again, let me preface by saying that I love Joe, and I wasn't offended by, his 45-minute or so of fat shaming, but and I know that his heart was in the right place. But when he said, you're a smart guy. I mean, why don't you lose weight? I mean, that frankly was not a profoundly astute position to have, right? I mean, it's not as though, you know, uh, thin people are those that have high IQ, whereas, the rest of us differently weighted folks, uh, are all the idiots who don't know any better, right? So of course I know, the things that one needs to do to lose weight, but knowing it and doing it is a different thing. Most of you know, for example, that I think only about 5% of all people who go on diets ever are able to successfully resolve the problem. So it's a very, very physiologically difficult thing to do. Not that I'm granting cover for my overweightedness, not at all. Ultimately, it is within uh, the power of each individual to make changes to his or her life. But to answer your question, so yes, it's very powerful to have the knowledge to be able to guide our lives. That doesn't mean that we could always implement that knowledge. Number 11, I thought that would be sort of a good way to end today's session. Who was your favorite guest and why? And who would you love to host? So let me answer the first part first. I'm I'm not gonna tell you, here's a ranking of my favorite guests. There were a few that might have been a bit more memorable. One of the things that I hope that when people watch my conversations, they feel is that I'm somebody who's obviously very, very intellectually curious, inquisitive. I love to do this for no other reason than the purity of the process. And so the way that I choose my guests, because a lot of people have written to me in the past, they how the hell do you find all these people and all these interesting people? Because I truly have a very broad outlook, right? I don't only speak to evolutionary psychologists. I don't only speak to people who criticize Islam. I don't only speak to fellow scientists. I'm interested in speaking uh, with anyone who is interesting, who's going to enrich my life in that short moment that we tango with one another, and hopefully enrich the lives of those who are watching the show. And therefore, that's why I'm always open to talking to all sorts of people. And this is why I'm particularly disappointed by those who, Majid Nawaz, who somehow are too haughty and lofty to, engage in discourse. Uh, there is no reason to run away from having interesting conversations. And so I would say all my guests have brought something interesting. If in a few cases, uh, they were a bit tougher conversations, if only because, um, the positions that we each were coming from didn't allow for too much overlap, or not as much overlap as I would have liked. But I think you'll all agree that they're always very respectful conversations, very friendly conversations. Sometimes people comment, gee, you're always, I've met you in person, you're the loveliest guy, you're friendly, and I see your chats, you're friendly. Why are you sometimes mean on Twitter? It's not that suddenly I become Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's that different forums necessitate different strategies. A lot of the stuff that people think, oh, it's a meltdown, it's not at all a meltdown. I'm having fun. I'm doing this. I'm trolling the trolls. I oftentimes will feed the trolls. I'm having fun. I don't care about some random stranger who's saying some stupid things about me. I take it on literally because it's just part of my personality to have fun with these schmucks. So, who's my favorite guest? Love them all. Some are a lot more beautiful than others. Some of them are a lot sexier than others, but all of them had, interesting things to add to the pantheon of knowledge. Who would you love to host? Well, the list is a very, very long one. I think most of you who have been following me for a while know that I've, wanted to chat with Thomas Sowell for a long time, and this is not because of it's not a, you know, cult personality hero thing that, oh gee, I want to meet Thomas Sowell, but rather, you know he is a guy who was, fighting social justice warriors in the 60s when there wasn't a term called social justice warriors, right? This is a guy, you can go to clips of Thomas Sowell, smacking down some of these idiots, uh, you know, before I was born. And so this guy is a living historical monument, if I may be permitted to put it that way, and obviously a profoundly sharp guy. And so if I had to sort of think off the top of my head somebody that I think I would love to chat with, because certainly it would be an honor to chat with him, but also because he truly is a historical figure in that sense, I think it would be Thomas Sowell. So that puts an end to the 11 that I was going to answer today. There are two other questions that I jotted down, but I'll refrain from answering them today because in some cases, uh, I'm not quite ready to pronounce a position. In other cases, it'd be a bit too long. So here's one. What do you think of the free will debate with Harris Dennett being a good example of it? Well, next, I can't remember what day it falls on, but I think February 1st, Dan Dennett and I will be chatting. I'm not sure if this topic will come up, but I haven't followed the debate too closely. I have a rough sense of where they each fall, uh, but I have to say, unless I'm missing something, uh, some of the positions I find rather bewildering. I'll leave it at that. And I think the reason why I hesitate to say anything more is because, as you probably know, I'm somebody who's very forceful in my positions. I mean, I'm very clear in my positions when I feel confident about it. And I think humility requires that when you are not sufficiently clear as to all of the nuances of the topic, that you refrain from pretending that you know. And so I will respectfully hold off my opinion until I feel that I've sufficiently covered the various points of the debate, and then hopefully then I can weigh in. What is your take on group selection? I've already discussed this previously. I won't sort of rehash it here, uh, but I'll just simply say that for those of you who are interested in this discussion, uh, I briefly go into it in my first book where I talk about selection at the individual level, which is what Darwin thought at the organism level. Of course, later we know that selection happens at the gene level, and then there are some folks who used to think that things happen at the species level, right? If it's good for the species. So the classic proponent of that was Wynne Edwards, and then currently the top proponent of group selectionism is a good friend of mine and a very prominent evolutionary biologist, David Sloan Wilson, who, for example, has used group selectionism to explain the evolution of religion. The idea being that, for example, religious groups outsurvive non-religious groups because of their greater communality, greater cohesion, greater cooperation, and so on and so forth. So I'll leave it at that. There were many, many other questions that were asked, probably 5 times as many as I listed here, if not more. So apologies to all the folks who sent in questions and I didn't choose them. Please don't be offended by that. There are only so many questions that I can take. I'm not sure how I will do this in terms of, every how often I will do such a session, but it's really, really fun to receive all of your questions. And I mean, I'm just amazed and truly honored and privileged that you allow me to engage with you guys. I mean, there's so many unbelievably bright people that exist out there that send me these incredible emails, and here I am, sort of at the middle of all of this. Uh, having access into your private thoughts and to your at times private lives, and so I'm truly delighted that I've been able to build this forum. Thank you for your continued support. I hope that this was instructive. Let me know in the comment section if you like this uh, uh, type of episodes. I'm sure that we'll have hopefully many more in the future. Hope that you're having a great week so far. It is hump day today. Weekend is 2 days away. Talk to you soon. Cheers. Bye.